Hello everyone, welcome once again. I hope you are very well. I feel very good, very excited, and of course a little nervous about this second chapter of this podcast. On this occasion, being one of the first stories to tell, I want to bring those childhood memories where our grandparents, uncles, or even cousins told you stories of witches, demons, shadows, and even the classic legends such as La Llorona or El Hombre del Sombrero. And this main podcast of paranormal experience, I'm going to tell you about the first time I saw a witch. It happened when I was 6 years old, and my parents organized a camp with other relatives. My mother had prepared the food, and my father had been in chairs on setting up a tent to spend the night there. The day we would leave was scheduled for a weekend in the morning. The whole family went in a vehicle and the trip lasted 2 hours. During the trip to the camping place, several stops were made, so when we family arrived at the place where we would set up the tents to camp, it was already night. And everyone, without exception, was tired. The place was very dark, but you could make out thanks of the brightness of the moon small lake near the place where my family decided to place the tent house here that we would use that night. The place was very quiet, and the chirping of the crickets could be heard not far from you. Something I remember a lot was the sound of the branches of the trees hitting each other while the leaves crunched at the same distance as my father set up the tent. The voices of my other relatives were also heard, but despite being the only people there, the sound of the night was more subdued, and I managed to put the human voice of background. It was a quiet, very dark night, and being a girl, I couldn't notice many things. I remember that just after my father finished the setting of the camping tent, there was a silence in which only the wind could be heard. My relatives and parents looked at each other, and my brother took my hand for my mother's order. "Come check it out!" They yelled at my father, and together with the other relatives, they went into the trees. I remember that many hours passed in which my mother, brother, and I waited on one side of the camping tent, watching the lake, the trees where they all went, and the path through which we arrived. From time to time murmurs were heard. My mother tensed, but I didn't know why. Until finally, after a few more minutes, my father came out of the trees. My mother looked calmer. My father made a sign for us to approach, and after that my other relatives came out, shaking their hairs with concern. My father looked excited. By reflex, I approached, waiting to be close to him after he had gone exploring for the long minutes. My brother doubted it a little, and before he went after my mother, I stopped him. "Come back here," my mother told me in the scolding tone, but without shouting. It was more of a loud whisper, but I did not pay attention to my mother and continued walking towards my father. He took me by the hand, and we both disappeared between the trees. We took me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was actually a few steps until we reached a ditch. My father pointed me to the other side where I could see a small mound of earth. Nothing out of the ordinary. However, what my father was pointing out to me were the blurry black silhouettes that were accompanied by orange lights, which turned on and off. It didn't seem very surprising to me, but my father seemed very excited because he kept repeating, "They are flying towards the mountain. They are flying towards the mountain." I was trying to check how he saw that, because I only saw blurry silhouettes and lights that jumped as if they were moving disparately. After that, I just remember getting to the camping store, listening to my mother berate my father, and return home the next day. Also at that age, I was prescribed my first glasses. Well, that was the first story of this podcast. I know it is not something very surprising, but it is very significant because it was my first contact with the paranormal world and with the ophthalmologist. So I hope you liked this little story, and I will see you very soon. Sweet nightmares.